Let's play a short game and I invite you to observe yourself while playing this game. I want you to look around yourself and identify any objects that you have around you that are yellow, but at the same time I invite you to continue saying the word red. So look around for anything that is yellow. Can be sticky notes, a mug, pen, flowers, clothes. If you are outside, maybe cars, people wearing different clothes, trees. And while you are looking around and identifying all the objects that are yellow, continue saying the word red, red, red. And while you are continue observing any objects that are yellow around you, I invite you to increase the pace of saying the word red. If before you had a lower pace of saying red, now try to increase it maybe twice. For example, if before you are saying red, 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 now increase it to be red, 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 red. Or maybe you can take it even one level further and start saying red, 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 red. And don't forget at the same time to continue looking and identifying any objects that are yellow around you. Now, what did you observe while playing this game? There are some things that I noticed at myself while playing this game is that at the beginning I start looking for objects that are yellow and trying to focus on finding anything that is yellow around me. It was more like a competition with myself to find as many yellow objects as possible. But what I notice is that I start slowing down saying the word red. I'm very curious what has happened when I start emphasizing the word red and I ask you to increase the pace of saying it. What happened to me when I did it, I noticed that I start seeing red objects around me as well, not only yellow, but I start decreasing the focus and the number of objects that I was able to see that were yellow. And this is because there is a huge difference between doing two things at the same time and focusing on two things at the same time. And this is exactly what's going on in the workplace as well. I want you to imagine that your brain is like a computer that has multiple threads to process the information. And similar to a computer, if you give too much information at the same time and all the threads are busy to take care of processing parts of the information, at some point the computer will start freezing or even shutting down. And the same thing happens to your brain, to our brain as well. There are 11 million bits of information that we are facing every second. And there are a lot of researchers that shows that we are able to process only between 11 and 60 bits of information every single second. If you do a math, this is 0.00005% of the entire information that we are facing every single second. So when you are at work and you have to do 3 different tasks at the same time, let's assume you are in a meeting where you have to listen to what is being presenting there. This is task number 1. You probably have the emails opened and you are going through the emails while you are still listening. So this is task number 2. And maybe you are also taking some notes while listening to the meeting. This is task number 3. From my own experience, when I try to do all these 3 things at the same time, I'm losing focus on some of them. I cannot be 100% focused into listening the entire meeting, understanding everything that has been discussed there, while paying attention to reading and understanding the emails, while I'm also taking notes based on what has been discussed in the meeting. And usually, most of the time, when I try to multitask and do other things while being in a meeting, it happens to me so many times people to ask me a question and I have to ask them to repeat the question or give me more context because I was multitasking. There are a lot of researchers around multitasking and what they identified is that multitasking does not exist. What we actually do on a daily basis, we are switching between tasks, trying to do one task and then focusing on another one and another one, but we cannot as human beings to be able to multitask and have the same level of focus on all the tasks that we are trying to do at the same time. And all this concept of multitasking and being able to complete more work if you do multiple things at the same time is just an illusion that overwhelms you, stresses you, and at some point can get you to get burnout. For some people, working from home was a huge improvement in their productivity, and one of the main reasons was that they had more control on their work environment. I remember myself when I had to go to the office, and because it was an open space office, I was able to listen to everyone talking around. There were people from the sales team that had to give multiple phone calls during the day. There were people that were joining different meetings, or people that were just having a coffee chat. And all these noises around me has distracted me a lot. I remember myself wearing headphones and trying to listen to soft music and trying to reduce the noise and distractions that has happening around me. But there is a study conducted at Zurich University where they asked people to try to learn English words while listening to music. And what they noticed is that people that were listening to music, most of them were performing worse than people that were just focusing on learning the English words without listening to music. And this is because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we are facing a lot of information every second, and our brain is trying to filter out the information that is not needed. Similar to the game that we played at the beginning of the video, where I ask you to look for any object that is yellow around you while saying the word red. You probably notice that you start seeing more yellow or more red depending on what you are focusing on at the time. So this study conducted at the Zurich University found that listening to music while trying to do tasks that require learning, it actually affects the performance in a negative way, because your brain is focusing on learning the new skill and is trying to constantly filter out the music that is in the background. Another thing that I noticed at myself is I really like to listen to podcasts while I'm cooking. And I noticed that sometimes I'm able to focus more on listening to the podcast and I'm able to gather more information than other times, where there are times where I have to go back and replay the podcast to be able to pay attention to it. And the reason is that even if I do two tasks at the same time, cooking and listening to a podcast, if I am familiar with the recipe and I know what are the steps and what needs to be done, then my attention can go more towards the podcast. But if there is a new recipe that I'm preparing for the first time, I need to pay more attention to the ingredients and the things that I need to do while I'm not focusing so much on the podcast. There is an experiment published in 2001 where multiple adults and young people were asked to try to solve math problems and try to classify geometric objects. And during the study, they were asking to try to switch from solving one problem to solve another problem, or to try to arrange those geometric objects without necessarily waiting for them to complete one problem before jumping to another problem. And what they noticed is that between these switches, the time that people needed to be able to refocus on the new task was lower or higher, depending on some criteria. And those criteria were the level of familiarity and how simple those problems were for people. The more complex the problem was and the more unfamiliar the person was with the new problem, the more time they needed to be able to switch between one task to another task. There is an article on Forbes where Dr. Sonia Gupta mentioned that when we are trying to switch between one task to another task, our brain is still processing the previous task. So it's not instant switching where you are doing task number 1 now and you are switching to now task number 2 and you completely forgot about task number 1. Your brain is still processing some of the information about the first task and is not 100% focused on task number 2. If you are thinking about your work environment, if you join a meeting that requires a lot of attention and maybe you are learning new information and after the meeting you are trying immediately to switch doing other things, probably you notice yourself that you are still thinking about what has been discussed in the previous meeting. And the more unfamiliar you are with the concepts that have been discussed in the meeting, and depending on the complexity of the concepts that have been discussed in the meeting, the more time you'll need to focus on the other task. And there are a lot of studies that shows that we need on average 23 minutes to be able to switch from one task to another. And this number can go upper or can go lower depending on how familiar or complex are those tasks that you are trying to switch between. It doesn't mean that you need to go in the other extreme and now to try to not multitask at all, but just pay attention and try to observe yourself in the upcoming days. If when you are trying to multitask, how complex and unfamiliar are you with the tasks. Because if you are already very familiar and all the tasks are simple, probably you'll need less time and you'll not feel so stressed or overwhelmed to multitask. But at the same time, also pay attention that if you are constantly multitasking, even if you are familiar or the tasks are simple, over time you'll start feeling more tired and stressed and overwhelmed and eventually get burnout. I really like this analogy about multitasking where you are trying to hit the gas and the brake pedal at the same time. Practically you are not moving forward and you are just forcing the car. And it's the same with the multitasking as well. You are trying to switch to task number 2, but you are still processing task number 1, so you are somewhere between the two, and at the end of the day you'll probably notice that you were not able to complete none of the two tasks the way that you wanted. And if you are like me, a perfectionist who is trying to do all the tasks perfectly, probably multitasking makes you so tired and overwhelmed that at the end of the day you have the impression that you haven't done anything. I really hope that you found this video useful. Thank you so much for watching it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.